When a quiet little boy kept his coat zipped tight every day, through lunch, through gym, even in the heat, most teachers thought it was just his way of feeling safe. But one subtle detail changed everything: the uneven stitches hidden along the seam. Today's story follows Ms. Harlow, a teaching assistant who noticed what others missed, and uncovered a truth no child should ever have to carry. Before we begin, let us know where you're watching from, and if you've ever trusted your gut when something felt wrong, please like this video and subscribe for more stories that matter. The hum of the radiators in classroom 3B was a familiar winter sound, a metallic sigh against the backdrop of shuffling papers and whispered conversations. For Sarah Harlow, a teaching assistant who navigated the currents of primary school life with quiet observation, the sounds were usually just background noise. She'd learned, in her 3 years at Northwood Elementary, to read the room not just by noise, but by the subtle shifts in energy, the unspoken tensions, the small visual cues that told stories the children themselves often couldn't articulate. She knew the fidgety scratch of anxiety, the slumped posture of exhaustion, the defiant set of a jaw hiding frustration. Most children were open books even when they tried not to be. But Mason Reyes was different. 8 years old, new to Northwood this year, listed vaguely in the records as being in foster care placement, he was an enigma wrapped in bright blue nylon. It was the coat. A puffer jacket, the kind meant for sub-zero temperatures, a vibrant, almost electric blue that stood out starkly against the muted tones of the classroom. Mason never, ever took it off. Not when he arrived, shaking off the morning chill. Not during lessons, even when the stuffy classroom air grew thick and warm, fogging the lower panes of the tall windows. Not at lunchtime in the bustling, overheated cafeteria. Not even for PE, where he moved with a stiff reluctance, hampered by the bulky garment zipped tight right up to his chin. He was a small, solitary island of blue in the sea of restless children. At first, Sarah attributed it to the usual anxieties of a child in transition. Foster care was a world of uncertainty. Clinging to a familiar object, even an unwieldy winter coat, made a certain kind of sense. A security blanket, perhaps. A tangible piece of stability in a life that likely felt anything but stable. Many kids had their own versions: a worn teddy bear tucked into a backpack, a specific pencil they refused to write with anything else, a repetitive phrase muttered under their breath. Sarah understood the need for anchors. But as autumn deepened into the damp chill of early winter, the coat began to feel less like a comfort object and more like confinement. It wasn't just that he wore it, it was how he wore it. Always zipped. Always tight. His hands rarely emerged fully from the cuffs. He developed a technique for manipulating pencils and lunch trays with just his fingertips poking out. He moved with a guarded stiffness, his shoulders perpetually hunched as if bracing for impact. If another child brushed past him too closely in the hallway, he would flinch, pulling the coat tighter around himself, his eyes darting nervously. He rarely spoke, and when he did, his voice was a low murmur easily lost in the classroom din. He seemed to exist behind a wall, and the blue coat was its most visible rampart. Sarah watched him, her initial tolerance slowly morphing into a persistent, low-level hum of concern. There was a difference between a child seeking comfort and a child hiding. Mason felt like he was hiding. Sarah Harlow wasn't naive. She'd chosen to work in schools like Northwood, schools that served diverse communities facing complex challenges, precisely because she believed in the power of noticing, of advocating for the children who might otherwise slip through the cracks. Her own childhood had been marked by periods of instability, moments where a kind word or a watchful eye from a teacher had felt like a lifeline. She carried that memory, that sense of responsibility, into her work every day. It made her patient, observant, perhaps sometimes overly sensitive to the subtle signs of distress. She lived alone in a small, tidy apartment overlooking a park, her evenings often spent marking papers or preparing classroom materials, the quiet punctuated only by the distant sounds of the city. Her life was orderly, predictable, a stark contrast to the chaotic undercurrents she often sensed swirling around the children in her care. Mason Reyes, with his silent vigilance and his impenetrable blue coat, tapped into that deep well of protective empathy within her. The core conflict began to take shape not as a dramatic confrontation, but as a slow dawning unease. Was this just a troubled child's coping mechanism, or was it something more? Was the coat a shield or a cage? The school records offered little clarity. Mason Reyes, DOB, March 12, status, ward of the county, foster placement. An agency name was listed, County Family Services, along with a caseworker, Ms. Evans, whose voicemail Sarah had already encountered more times than she cared to admit. No family contacts. No history provided. Just the bare, bureaucratic facts that hinted at a fractured past but offered no roadmap for the present. Sarah tried gentle overtures, offering to hang his coat on the hook by the door. "Mason, you must be warm in that, sweetie. Want to take it off for a bit while we're inside?" A quick, negative shake of the head, eyes fixed firmly on his desk. Offering help, reaching into his backpack, subtly trying to get him to unzip even slightly. "Need a hand finding your reading book, Mason? Just unzip a little." Another refusal, Mason awkwardly contorting himself to retrieve the book without lowering the zipper even an inch. Each attempt met with the same silent, stubborn resistance, reinforcing the barrier the coat represented. He wasn't just wearing it, he was guarding it. The mystery deepened, pulling Sarah further into a state of watchful anxiety. She mentioned her concerns to the classroom teacher, Mr. Davies, a well-meaning but perpetually overwhelmed veteran nearing retirement. He sighed, running a hand through his thinning hair. "Foster kid, Sarah. Comes with the territory. Probably seen more than he should. The coat's his safety net. Best not to push it, might make things worse. Let the caseworker handle it. Sage advice, perhaps. Standard procedure." But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something was fundamentally wrong, that the coat signified more than just insecurity. The way he protected it, the way he flinched, the utter refusal to remove it under any circumstances. It felt less like a choice and more like a mandate. Whose mandate, though? That question echoed in the quiet spaces of Sarah's mind, refusing to be silenced by protocol or pragmatism. The incident that solidified Sarah's resolve, that turned vague unease into active investigation, happened during art class. The project involved papier-mâché, a messy, gloopy affair requiring rolled-up sleeves and a certain tolerance for sticky fingers. As Sarah moved around the classroom, assisting children with strips of newspaper and bowls of paste, she approached Mason's table. He sat stiffly, his blue-coated arms held awkwardly away from the messy supplies, his usual technique of fingertip manipulation clearly insufficient for this task. Sarah knelt beside him, keeping her voice low and calm. "Mason, this is going to get really messy. We need to roll up your sleeves, okay? Or maybe we can find you an art smock to wear over your coat." He shook his head vehemently, pressing his lips together, his eyes wide with something close to panic. "I can't. Please, Miss Harlow. It's okay. I'll be careful." But even as he spoke, trying to dip a strip of newspaper into the paste, his hand slipped, smearing a thick glob of white adhesive down the front of his blue sleeve. He froze, staring at the mess with horrified eyes. Sarah reached instinctively for a paper towel. "It's all right, we can wipe it off." As she gently dabbed at the sleeve, her fingers brushed against the side seam, near the armpit. She felt something unexpected beneath the smooth nylon. Not the usual soft give of insulation, but something stiff, almost rigid. A distinct line of dense, uneven stitching, running several inches along the seam, clearly not part of the coat's original construction. It felt deliberate, hidden. Sarah pulled her hand back, her mind racing. Had the coat been altered? Sewn shut? Or perhaps something sewn inside? The implication sent a chill down her spine. She managed a neutral smile, cleaned the paste off as best she could, and moved away, but the sensation of those rough stitches lingered on her fingertips. Later that day, during quiet reading time, Sarah found a moment to approach Mason again. She sat beside him, not looming, just sharing the space. "That's a really special coat, isn't it, Mason? You wear it all the time." He nodded almost imperceptibly, eyes fixed on his book. "Did someone special give it to you?" Another slight nod. "My mom. Before she got sick." His voice was barely audible. Sarah's heart ached. "Okay. And does anyone help you take it off at home? Or do you keep it on there too?" Mason looked up then, his gaze direct, filled with a surprising, solemn intensity. "I'm not supposed to take it off. You told me. Not until she comes back. Not until I go back home." Sarah kept her voice carefully neutral, though her pulse quickened. "Who told you that, Mason? Who is he?" "My uncle," he whispered, glancing nervously towards the classroom door, as if expecting the person in question to materialize. "Uncle David. He takes care of me now. Uncle David." The name meant nothing. It wasn't the name of any registered foster parent Sarah was aware of. There was no Uncle David listed anywhere in Mason's sparse file. Ms. Evans, the perpetually unavailable caseworker, had never mentioned an uncle being involved in Mason's placement. Discrepancies. Secrets. Stitches hidden in a coat seam. A child instructed by an unknown uncle never to remove the coat given to him by his sick, absent mother. The pieces clicked into place, forming a disturbing, incomplete picture. This wasn't just about comfort or trauma anymore. This felt like manipulation, like control. Sarah knew with a certainty that settled cold and heavy in her gut that she couldn't wait for the overburdened system to catch up. She had to find out who Uncle David was and why he wanted Mason sealed inside that blue coat. The first step was the official file again. Sarah waited until after school, the building quieting down, the rhythmic click of the janitor's keys echoing in the empty hallway. In the school office, she pulled up Mason's record, scanning the screen intently. Placement agency, County Family Services. Caseworker, Janice Evans. Placement type, licensed foster home, emergency. Foster parent name, withheld/confidential per agency policy. No mention of an uncle. No David. Nothing to corroborate Mason's statement. Protocol dictated she contact the caseworker, Ms. Evans. Sarah tried her direct line again. Voicemail. She tried the main agency number, navigating the automated menu, finally reaching a harassed-sounding receptionist who promised to pass along an urgent message to Ms. Evans regarding Mason Reyes. Sarah wasn't optimistic. Urgent in agency terms often meant days, not hours. Frustration simmered. She needed answers now. Acting on instinct, fueled by adrenaline and anxiety, Sarah opened a separate browser window. She started with public records, searching for Mason Reyes, his date of birth. It yielded little, just confirmation of his ward of the county status. Then she tried searching for information related to his mother. What was her name? It wasn't in the school file. She backtracked, thinking about Mason's whispered words, before she got sick. What kind of sick? Where might she be? Sarah searched local news archives for child protection cases, missing persons related to foster care, anything that might connect. Dead ends. She leaned back, chewing on her lip. Uncle David. Where did he fit in? Could he be an unofficial caregiver, someone known to the mother but not the system? Or was it something more sinister? She decided to try a different approach. Northwood Elementary kept meticulous entry and exit logs for visitors and guardians. She accessed the digital logbook, searching for anyone signing Mason out or interacting with staff regarding him since his enrollment. Nothing. He arrived and left on the school bus assigned to the foster agency's designated routes. No guardian pickups. No parent-teacher conferences attended. It was as if he existed only within the school walls and the foster care system, with no visible external connections. Except for the phantom Uncle David. Sarah felt like she was chasing shadows. Doubt began to creep in. Was she overreacting? Misinterpreting a traumatized child's confusion? Mr. Davies' cautionary words echoed, best not to push it. But the image of the hidden stitches, the memory of Mason's fearful insistence, I'm not supposed to, wouldn't let her rest. She needed confirmation, something tangible. She thought about the caseworker again. If Ms. Evans wouldn't call back, maybe someone else at the agency would listen. She redialed the main number, this time asking for Ms. Evans' supervisor. After being put on hold for what felt like an eternity, a tired but professional voice came on the line. Maria Sanchez, CFS supervisor. How can I help you? Sarah took a deep breath and laid out her concerns, quickly, concisely. The coat, the refusal to remove it, the hidden stitches, the mention of an Uncle David not on file, the child's statement about being instructed not to take the coat off until his mother returned. She emphasized the urgency, the unexplained nature of the instruction, the potential for hidden harm or manipulation. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Miss Sanchez's voice lost some of its weary professionalism, replaced by a note of sharp attention. Stitches? And an Uncle David? That doesn't sound right. Mason Reyes. Let me pull his file. Hold please. The hold music was grating, tinny. Sarah tapped her pen anxiously. Finally Miss Sanchez returned. Okay, Ms. Harlow. Thank you for calling this in. Mason was placed in an emergency licensed home 3 months ago after his mother, Elena Reyes, experienced a severe psychotic break and required involuntary hospitalization. The placement is with... Miss Sanchez paused, clicking sounds audible in the background. A Mrs. Peterson on Elm Street. Standard procedure. No male relatives listed as contacts or potential guardians. Certainly no Uncle David authorized for contact or care. The address Mason gets picked up from by our transport. That's Mrs. Peterson's address. Who is this man David? Where is Mason actually living? The supervisor's alarm mirrored Sarah's own. This wasn't just a procedural anomaly, it was a potential abduction hiding in plain sight, facilitated by the gaps in an overburdened system. We need to locate him immediately, Miss Sanchez stated, her voice now crisp with command. Can you confirm Mason is still at school? No, Sarah replied, glancing at the clock. School dismissed an hour ago. He would have gotten on the bus. The bus heading to Mrs. Peterson's address. But if he wasn't living there, where did he go? Miss Sanchez swore softly under her breath. Okay. I'm dispatching an emergency response team to the Peterson address immediately to verify if he ever arrived or if she knows anything. I'm also looping in law enforcement. This man David, if he's posing as a guardian. Thank you, Miss Harlow. Your instincts were right. Stay available if we need more information. Sarah hung up, her hand trembling. It was real. Her fears weren't unfounded. Mason was potentially with an unauthorized, unknown man, his connection to the boy and his vulnerable mother shrouded in mystery, his motives terrifyingly unclear. The blue coat wasn't just armor, it was a clue, a breadcrumb trail leading towards a truth darker than she had imagined. The hours that followed crawled by with agonizing slowness. Sarah stayed late at the school, ostensibly tidying the classroom, but really just waiting, jumping every time her phone buzzed. The initial report from the CFS team dispatched to Mrs. Peterson's house was confusing, then alarming. Mrs. Peterson, an elderly woman who provided short-term emergency care, confirmed Mason had been placed with her initially, 3 months ago. But, she explained tearfully to the responders, a man identifying himself as Mason's uncle, David Miller, had shown up about a week later. He had paperwork, she insisted, signed documents seemingly authorizing him to take over Mason's care, citing a family emergency that required Mrs. Peterson's room for another child. The paperwork looked official enough, bearing what seemed to be agency letterhead and signatures. Overwhelmed and trusting, Mrs. Peterson had released Mason into his care. She hadn't heard from the agency or Mason since, assuming everything was legitimate. She provided David Miller's supposed contact number and a forwarding address he'd given, an address that, upon quick investigation by law enforcement now involved, proved to be a vacant lot across town. The paperwork was forged. David Miller, whoever he was, had effectively abducted Mason from the foster care system weeks ago, using rudimentary forgeries and exploiting the system's communication gaps. Panic coiled tight in Sarah's chest. Where was Mason now? Who was this man? Why the elaborate deception? Miss Sanchez called Sarah back, her voice strained. We have police actively searching. We cross-referenced the name David Miller with Elena Reyes' known associates. There's a David Miller with a record, an ex-boyfriend of Elena's, involved in some domestic disputes years ago, before Mason was born. Nothing major but a flag. We think it's him. We don't have a current address, but we're working on it. The connection to the mother, the ex-boyfriend status, it painted a grim picture. Was this about control? Revenge? Or something tied to Elena's paranoia before her hospitalization? Sarah remembered Mason's words, not until she comes back. Was the coat somehow linked to the mother's return? What had she stitched inside? Driven by a desperate need to do something, Sarah accessed the school security footage from the bus lane archives. She scanned the recordings from the past few weeks, looking for Mason getting off the bus in the afternoons. Usually he just walked off down the street, presumably towards the Peterson house he never reached. But yesterday was different. Instead of walking towards Elm Street, Mason had hesitated at the corner, looking around nervously, before darting across the street towards a battered gray sedan parked half a block down, partially hidden behind a large van. The driver's side window was down, an arm resting on the sill. Sarah zoomed in, the image grainy, indistinct. But the driver turned his head slightly, catching the light. Gaunt face. Baseball cap pulled low. It matched the fleeting glimpse she'd gotten of the man smoking on the porch that one evening weeks ago when she'd first driven by the address listed in the file, the address later found to be vacant. It was him. Uncle David. David Miller. He wasn't just an abstract figure. He was real, driving that car, picking Mason up directly from the bus stop when he thought no one was looking. Sarah immediately called Miss Sanchez back, relaying the information about the car. Make, model, color, approximate location near the bus stop. It wasn't much, but it was a lead, a concrete detail in the swirling fog of uncertainty. Police patrols were alerted to look for the vehicle. The wait continued, thick with dread. Sarah pictured Mason, small and silent, zipped tight in his blue coat, trapped in a car with a man who had lied and forged documents to gain control of him, a man connected to his mother's troubled past. What secrets did that coat hold? What promise was Mason clinging to? The fluorescent lights of the empty classroom seemed to hum with anxiety, amplifying the silence, each minute stretching towards an unknown, terrifying climax. The call came just after 9 p.m. It was Miss Sanchez again, her voice weary but relieved. They found him, Sarah. Patrol spotted the car parked outside a rundown motel on the edge of town. Miller was inside the room with Mason. He didn't resist. Mason is safe. Sarah sank into her chair, tears blurring her vision. Safe. The word was a bomb, easing the frantic tension that had gripped her for hours. Miss Sanchez continued, Mason is with our responders now. He's okay, physically unharmed, just very quiet. And Sarah, you were right about the coat. When they were preparing to take Mason to a new, secure placement, he got very agitated about the coat, insisted he couldn't take it off. Following your alert, the social worker handled it carefully. They found the stitches you mentioned. Inside the lining. Miss Sanchez paused, her voice thick with emotion. They found a folded bus pass, a small key taped to a piece of cardboard, and a handwritten note. It was from his mother. Sarah held her breath. What did it say? It just said, I'll come back for you. Stay warm. Use this. Love, Mama. The simple words, penned by a mother spiraling into illness but desperate to provide one last tether for her son, hit Sarah with the force of a physical blow. The coat wasn't a cage imposed by Miller. It was a promise, a desperate lifeline from his mother. Miller had likely known about the coat, perhaps even encouraged Mason to keep it on, twisting the mother's desperate act into a tool of control, ensuring Mason wouldn't accidentally reveal the hidden contents or draw attention that might expose his own fraudulent custody. He'd exploited the boy's love for his mother, his desperate hope for her return. The cruelty of it was staggering. David Miller was taken into custody, facing charges of kidnapping, fraud, and child endangerment. The investigation into his motives and any connection to Elena Reyes's sudden decline and disappearance would continue, but Mason was out of his reach. The immediate crisis was over. The system, prompted by watchful eyes and persistent advocacy, had finally worked. A week later, Mason Reyes returned to Northwood Elementary. Sarah watched from the classroom door as he walked down the hallway, flanked by a new, kind-faced social worker. He looked small, almost fragile without the bulky blue coat, yet somehow less burdened. He wore a simple gray hoodie, zipped only halfway up, and carried a new-looking backpack. He paused outside classroom 3B, took a deep breath, and walked in. The other children greeted him with the casual acceptance typical of their age, absorbing his return back into the classroom ecosystem without fuss. Mason went to his usual desk, sat down, and calmly began to take out his supplies. But before settling in, he stood up again. He walked directly to Sarah's desk at the front of the room. In his hands he held the bright blue puffer coat. It was clean now, the paste smudge gone, but the fabric still bore the faint lines where the hidden stitches had been carefully removed. He held it out to her. His expression was solemn, his eyes holding a depth of understanding that belied his years. You can keep it, Miss Harlow, he said, his voice quiet but clear. Just in case she comes back and wants to know where I went. Sarah looked down at the coat, then back at Mason's waiting face. Her throat tightened. She reached out and gently took the blue coat from him. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, please hit the like button and subscribe for more narratives like this one.